Now I would like to introduce to you Tanishka Kachru. She earned her MA in History of Design and Decorative Arts from Parsons School of Design in New York and her BA in Architecture from the University of Mumbai. She was an assistant curator at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London and at National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad in India, the abbreviation NID that we will be hearing about. She is part of the exhibition design discipline offering courses in history and theory of design and design for museums and design for heritage spaces. Tanishka's research interests are in the areas of design histories from post-colonial perspectives, digital heritage interpretation, and discourses of heritage in smart cities. Recent publications include The Staging of Indian National Identity Through Exhibitions, 1850 to 1947 in the Routledge Companion to Design Studies. Further, Nakashima at NID, Contemporary Reflections on NID History, Teaching Through the Design Archive in the Bauhaus Imaginista Journal this year. Recent curatorial projects include the Nakashima at NID exhibition in 2016 on the life and work of Japanese-American craftsman George Nakashima. She is was co-curator of the Center and Beyond exhibition that presents 50 years of ceramic and glass design at NID. She is the curator of the scholarly work of Hakusha, Votive Terracotta, India, the exhibition which took place this year. Please welcome Tanishka Kachru.
Good morning to you all. As you know, I'm from Ahmedabad, but today I'm traveling via Mexico, where last week on Thursday we opened an exhibition on modernism in India through the NID archives. So I feel like I've been talking about NID archives for this whole week now, but it's a pleasure to do that, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you to all the organizers and to Annemarie for the lovely introduction. So today, my lecture is about the Bauhaus in Ahmedabad. And the Bauhaus in Ahmedabad comes via the Museum of Modern Art. The Design Archive at the NID holds one of the most important collections of 20th century design in India. It includes works by designers trained at the NID, as well as what are considered classics of 20th century European and American design. And much of this came as part of a traveling exhibition produced by the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And this exhibition has been extensively examined by historian Farhan Karim, who points out the complexity of the moment in which the exhibition arrives to India, as a time when the Gandhian spirit of asceticism was not yet forgotten, but on the other hand, the first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru's sympathy for Soviet-style socialism blended with his longing for America's promised land of consumer goods. The exhibition artifacts located in this newly formed modern design school, thus, I contend, became possible points of departure for exploring a new Indian modernity. The archive and collection are a vital resource today, used by students, faculty, and visiting scholars for study. Most of the production from this archive today is in the form of exhibitions and text. I will be trying to show how through an archival pedagogy, we are today attempting to make space to co-produce new interpretations and meanings. And this has become a significant way as a way of critically examining institutional history and modern design's historical significance in the context of contemporary design education in India. The exhibition, Designed Today in America and Europe, was curated by Arthur Drexler and Greta Daniel as part of the international program of the Museum of Modern Art, which became part of US cultural diplomacy in the Cold War competition. Traveling through 7 Indian cities that were hubs of manufacturing, the exhibition finally came to rest at the NID around the time that it was founded. The Buckminster Fuller Dome, used as a traveling exhibition structure, contained a spectacle of seemingly mundane household objects, modern designs for living, that gave Indian audiences a first-hand experience of Western modernity. Sorry, I'm going to skip that. Yes. And ended up attracting more than 1 million visitors. Not very large for India, but nevertheless, quite a large audience for an exhibition in the 1950s. Succeeding the highly popular Good Design exhibitions produced by the MoMA first in 1951, which was seen as explicitly commercial affairs sponsored by retailers like Bloomingdale's as well as by manufacturers. In some cases, the breakthrough designs were commissioned for production, like Charles and Ray Eames and Eero Saarinen's shell chairs for Herman Miller and Knoll, respectively. And of course, the ubiquitous Tupperware, which we have cupboards full of in NID, crumbling away. I think I have an image here. Edgar Kaufman Jr., curator, who wrote the defining text, What is Modern Design, in 1950, and directed MoMA's famous Good Design exhibition series from 1950 to 55, gave the ultimate expression of its message, saying that on the basis of eye appeal, function, construction, and price were the criteria for selection of objects for the exhibitions. While MoMA's mid-century message of good design has its critiques, these exhibitions succeeded in forging unprecedented connections between designers, manufacturers, retailers, and consumers, and can be seen as raising the profile of modern design, and in this case, even internationally. The collection of exhibitions of objects in the exhibition that came to India mirrors the Good Design series and clearly points towards how the exhibition was viewed by the Indian government as an important element in producing benefits for India's developing industries and economy. At NID, the objects not only formed a canon of Western design, but also, as I would like to argue, became prototypes for modernity, an experience of being modern, mediated through designed artifacts and environments. Perhaps the biggest contribution of these exhibition artifacts, in a manner similar to Le Corbusier's buildings in the subcontinent, was to introduce a material vocabulary for modern design that did not have any parallels in the handcrafts of India. I use the word prototype here in a dual sense. One, as an example of the time and place it embodied, and secondly, as in design usage, where the design object is seen as part of an iterative process where improvements are constantly being made. So what kind of modernity did the young professionals experience in the context of NID and the city of Ahmedabad? Modernism came to India through multiple pathways, charted by individuals, institutions, and eventually the state itself. We can trace one such pathway through the history, ideology, architecture, pedagogical structure, national projects, and associations of the NID. In the 1950s, the foremost agenda of the Indian state was to modernize the nation in terms of healthcare, industry, occupations, and consumer goods. Several national institutes were set up at the time, such as the Indian Institute of Technology, the Indian Institute of Management, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and of course, the National Institute of Design. And one of the prime reasons for setting up NID was to bridge the gap between the age-old handcraft making processes and the new technologies being introduced in the country. The famous Eames report, or India report, drafted by the American designers Charles and Ray Eames, defined the underlying spirit that would lead NID, the founding of NID, and the beginning of a new kind of design education in India. The report recommended a problem-solving design consciousness that linked learning with actual experience and suggested that the designer could be a bridge between tradition and modernity. It called upon future designers to re-examine the alternatives of growth available to the country at the time. Known as the National Institute of Industrial Design, when it started out in 1961, NID attracted influential design teachers from all over the world, including many from Ulm, seen as the legitimate successor of the Bauhaus in Germany. One of the most crucial and somewhat complete source that sheds light on the journey of this institution is the vast collection of photographic prints, negatives, illustrations, maps, project documents, teaching aids, and student projects since 1961. It contains a repository of many national projects, works of national and international designers, artists, craftsmen, teachers, students, products, traditional craft forms, material explorations, classroom projects, community projects, as well as design solutions. But more than 40 years before NID, Rabindranath Tagore had visited Bauhaus in 1917 and used it to model Shilp Sadan, a school for crafts and design, in his educational experiment with modernity at Sriniketan. The training in crafts in Shilp Bhavan, or the Hall of Industry, started in 1922 with weaving, tannery, carpentry, and expanded in a short while to include cotton, silk, and silk weaving, dari weaving, calico printing, woolen rug weaving, wick weaving, manufacture of straw mats and carpets. These were followed with experiments in indigenous dyes, woodblock printing, goldsmithy, pottery, and so on. The purpose of this program was to economically and socially re-empower the village artisan and make him more employable in a new cultural ecosystem. A Japanese carpenter, German potters and Swedish weavers, and Indian trained overseas were all part of the training team. The effort was to put together a program to design objects that will be attractive to a new generation of Indians and fit in with their lifestyle. As opposed to this approach, much later, in post-independence India, the 1953 Industrial Policy Resolution envisaged a simultaneous process of training and development of technical and managerial personnel. This expressed the desire to throw open training to a cadre of experts who would meet the needs of modern India. In the same year, the Museum of Modern Art in New York invited India to stage the first independent exhibition titled Textiles and Ornamental Arts of India. And this is when Pupil Jaikar, the curator of the exhibition, met Charles and Ray Eames, which led to the India report and the founding of NID through grants from the Ford Foundation and the Indian state. I want to spend some time now talking about this idea of modernity and NID pedagogy. Classroom spaces and workshops at NID are modular and transparent, two qualities that resonated deeply with the architecture, modern sensibility, and the Bauhaus aesthetic. The emphasis was always on doing. students were envisioned as young professionals who would take up assignments with complete responsibility and learn on the job. Completely different from the educational practices and mandates in the rest of India, NID was a pedagogic experiment in modernity. Until 1969, the Institute offered faculty development programs to raise the first group of design educators in India. In 1970, the first undergraduate program, called the Professional Education Program, was finally established. Ahmedabad city had a rich architecture lexicon from the very early times. The modernists often also looked at the city and its climactic cultural conditions for inspiration. Of Le Corbusier's 4 buildings in Ahmedabad, 2 are entirely made of concrete and 2 use plain bricks with exposed elements of concrete, which became a recurring architectural motif in the modern buildings of the city. Indian architects B.V. Doshi and Charles Correa both succeeded Corbusier in designing modern buildings for the city, which in turn influenced a generation of architects, establishing Ahmedabad as a hub for modern architecture and design in India. One of the early trainees at NID is a furniture designer named Gajanand Upadhyay. He joined NID as a teacher, as a trainee with a degree in architecture in 1962. And as he recounts, he was asked by one of the founders, Gira Sarabhai, to study and make a copy of Hans Wegner's classic cow horn dining chair, which you see here on the left. This piece of oral history is one of the first stories of how the exhibition objects that came with the MoMA exhibition were used by the design school. Later, Gajanand Upadhyay worked with Hans Gugelot on the 2442 chair, which Gugelot also called the India Lounge on the right. This chair became the starting point for the discovery of transcultural design discourses between the Ulm School of Design and NID during the 2017 Bauhaus Lab postgraduate research program conducted by Regina Bittner. While the original chair was found to be missing from the NID archive, the lab uncovered people, networks, and progressive pedagogies. From 1966 to 1974, Gajanand Upadhyay was at the Danish Academy of Fine Arts in Copenhagen. First, as a student of furniture making sponsored by the NID, and then he decided to stay on as a teacher and a practicing designer, working with the likes of Paul Kjærholm, whose metal chair was already a part of the MoMA exhibition collection that he had seen in NID. He came back in 1974 and started making furniture in tubular metal, stacking stools, folding chairs for the hostel, lounge chairs, and even a wall-hung chair, which again is a prototype, I think, seen here and wasn't really put into manufacture. But all the rest were. Even before Gajanand Upadhyay came back from Denmark and started making this furniture, another European designer, Rolf Missol, was invited to NID in 1969-70 to produce a collection of furniture that could be produced in the NID workshops and sold through the shop. This was the second such attempt by the NID to produce furniture designs for everyday living that could be sold in their shop in Ahmedabad. The first was when in 1964, American designer George Nakashima was asked to design a range of furniture that could be sold as well. The furniture catalog produced to market Rolf Missol's range is revealing of an Indian aspiration for modern lifestyle, not very dissimilar from those in Europe and America. The nationalist nature of NID intersected with the internationalist in ways that allowed its founders to keep their gaze towards the West while building a dream of national and self-reliant industrial design. And as Claire Wintle notes about the relationship between NID and Ford Foundation in her paper Diplomacy and Design School and the Design School, she says, indeed, if Douglas Ensminger and his staff hope to stabilize India, buoy up employment, and develop Indian design as a buffer to communist encroachment, this was entirely in line with the Nehruvian desire to do exactly the same for the benefit of the Indian nation. In conclusion, I would like to say that the transfer of pedagogy took place not only through people and networks, but that the objects of modern design that came to India through the Museum of Modern Art were also seen as active agents. First, by the Indian government, which had printed 20,000 copies of the exhibition catalogue prepared by MoMA and distributed it widely to small industries all over the country. And secondly, by the design school, where they played a crucial role in transferring the design pedagogy and practices developed at the Bauhaus through their continuous presence in the Institute and were actively used for this purpose by the teachers to develop an understanding not only of modern materials and structure, but also aesthetics. So I will end now with just one example, and this is from 2015, when a student has prepared a project called Know Your Archives, and amongst the objects that he decided to talk about is Marcel Breuer's stacking tables. And I can see them out here. It's quite fun to do that. And we have many such experiments going on at the NID. Yes, and with that, thank you.